Alright, so for this video and the next two, we're going to continue on with decimals. So on 1.6, we dealt with addition of decimals. I'm hoping you'll get the paper out that I gave you on 1.6 from your folder, because it gives you all 4 lessons and the steps, and just focus in on today's, which is the second one, that I have to do the multiplication and then figure out where my decimal goes. On my first lesson at the very top of the paper was addition of decimals and subtraction. So I had to line up my decimals and fill in with zeros anywhere that they were missing, drop down my decimal, and then do my adding as my subtracting. So you'll have to excuse me as I'm doing the videos. You can tell my voice still isn't quite right from losing it last week. So just be patient and pay close attention as we go through this. The process that I teach with multiplying multi-digit decimals or even numbers, I know is a little different than probably what you're used to. You do not have to do this. I'm just telling you this is a good way to remember to bring down the proper number of zeros every time you do these math problems that are multiplication. And that way, it ensures that you're going to do fewer mistakes. If you can always remember how many zeros to bring down and that you do it and you get the right answer, then I'm fine with that. So let's get into the first practice problem. Our first practice problem deals with this young lady. She's working at a store for 38.5 hours per week, and that she gets $9.70 every single hour that she works. So we have to start by stacking our math problem. And we notice there's 3 digits and 3 digits, but the decimals don't line up. And as I said, we don't line up our decimals other than on adding and subtracting. On these, we just have to do our multiplication first and then figure out where our decimals go. So there's a lot of steps to these, but they're not difficult steps. So it's just keeping track of everything that I do so that in the end, I can figure out exactly where my decimal goes and I can put it in the right place. So on multiplying, I always start with my bottom right number, which is in my ones column here. So I have a 5, and I'm going to multiply by my 5. And I have 5 times 0, which is 0. Now, these are my estimating parts of my questions. And once again, we're not going to do estimating for a few weeks now. So just cross out the estimating and ignore them. And go with the 5. 5 times 0 is 0. 5 times 7 is 35. So I write down my 5 and I carry my addition of 3 to the top. 9 times 5 is 45. Plus 3 gives me my 48. This is where it's a little different than the way most people teach it. But if you learn these steps, you'll always be remembering how many zeros to bring down, and you'll hold the correct place value as you do your math problems. So the way I do it is I underline when I say my second number, so I'm looking at the number on bottom that I'm multiplying by, tells me 2, and I circle whatever is behind it. There's one number behind it, so it tells me to bring down, therefore 1 0, because that's what that circle looks like. Once I've held that place value, then I multiply by the 8. So 8 times 0 is 0. 8 times 7 is 56. So I'm going to put down my 6 and carry my 5. 8 times 9 is 72. Plus the 5 is 77. All right, so I multiplied by my 8. So now I'm going to my 3, and that's my third number. I underline it, and I say, my third number tells me to what? Bring down these 2 zeros, right? So I'm going to bring down 2 zeros, and then I can multiply by my 3. So now I start with my 3. 3 times 0 is 0. 3 times 7 is 21. Put down my 1. I carry my 2. 3 times 9 is 27. Plus 2 is 29. Now, those of you that struggle with your handwriting, and there's a couple of you trying to fit a lot of work into these little itty-bitty spaces on our homework. And if you write really big, I need you to start using lined paper so that I can follow your work easier, and it allows you to line it up nice and neat without making any mistakes, hopefully. So then I'm just lined up perfectly in my columns, and I'm just going to add them. So I have 0. 5 and 2 zeros is 5. 8 and 6 is 14, so I put down my 4 and I carry my 1. 7 plus 1 is 8, plus 4 is 12. Oh, I missed another one. So 7 plus 1 is 9, plus 4 is 13. Carry my 1. And 9 plus 1 is 10 plus 7, so 17, carry my 1, which just leaves me with 1 plus 2, which is 3. So my answer looks like a really big answer. If I didn't have any decimal points in there, we'd be thinking we want to work at a grocery store because she gets paid $373,450 per week. That's more money than I could ever imagine making in a week, let alone in a year. But if we think logically, we know, well, that can't be my answer. So what do I need to do? So this is where I need to look at counting decimal spaces. And if you look on the paper I gave you, you can put in parentheses, not decimal points, not the same thing. Decimal spaces is going to the decimal point and counting how many spaces there are behind it. So in the top number, I go to my decimal point, I have 2 decimal spaces behind it. And in my bottom number, at my decimal point, I have 1 decimal space behind it. So that gives me 3. So I have to go all the way down to the bottom and I have to move from right to left, always right to left, 3 times. So if there's 3 up at the top, I have to move 3 at the bottom. So I'm going to shift 1, 2, 3 and put it exactly where it is. So we have 373.450. Now, on decimal numbers, I never keep a 0 at the end of a decimal number unless it's holding the hundredths position on money. Other than that, I cross out that 0 and I get rid of it. And I just make sure that it's not in my answer. So she makes working 38.5 hours a week at $9.70 an hour, $373.45. Hopefully that's pretty logical through those steps, but we will practice a couple more just to make sure. So once again, bear with me on my voice. I'm doing the best that I can. Just try to pay attention and follow along. So on this one, we have a 0.084, which would be 84 thousandths. And on this one, we have 0.096, which would be 96 thousandths. So I always say the number and then the place value is always where that last digit's place value is. Same process each and every time. I'm going to start with this bottom right first number. So I'm going to start with the 6. 6 times 4 is 24. I put down my 4. I carry my 2 up above. 6 times 8 is 48. Plus 2 is 50. I put down my 0 and carry my 5. 6 times 0 is 0. But I still have that addition of 5. So 0 plus 5 is 5. So I keep my 5. So now I have to go to my second number. So my second number tells me 2. So I circle the 6. Bring down, so I don't forget to bring it down. And what am I bringing down? Well, I circled one number, which looks like a 0, so I bring down 1 0. Now I multiply by my 9. 9 times 4 is 36. So I put down my 6 and I carry my 3. 9 times 8 is 72, but I have to add 3 to it. So 72 plus 3 is 75. I put down my 5 and I carry my 7. And then once again, I have to multiply by that 0. 9 times 0 is 0 plus the 7, so I keep my 7. Now my third number is a 0. I don't need to show that. It's just extra steps if I do, and it will not change my value at all. So I'm just left with those 2 columns, and I add them up. So I have 4 and 0, which is 4. 0 and 6, which is 6. 5 and 5, which is 10. Carry my 1, put down my 0. And then 7 and 1 is 8. Now I go back to my original problem and I count decimal spaces. So my decimal point with 3 spaces behind it. My decimal point with 3 spaces behind it. So there's a total of 6 decimal spaces in that math problem. So I have to go to the bottom and I have to move from right to left a total of 6 times. So I move 4, but I run out of digits. Well, if I have 6 up here, I have to move 6 in my answer. It doesn't matter if I run out of digits or not. So I have to put something in its place to hold those 2 extra place values. So I have to put in 2 zeros. So I put in a 0 and I move my 5th time. I still put in a 0 and I move my 6th time. Then I can have my decimal. So my answer is 0.0080 64. Make sure my decimal's in the right place, and then I have those zeros there. Now, this is a different lesson, because we haven't talked in 6th grade yet about the order of operations. When I do the order of operations, it's taught in several different ways from earlier stages in 3rd and 4th grade, where they throw you in with parentheses, but then they don't mention anything else. So I try to teach it exact as we go through it. I have to start with parentheses. So in parentheses, because we have as for several extra presents. So I know parentheses has to be done first in this math problem. Remember that that's an absolute value, square root, exponent, and parentheses. Those 4 always have to be done first. Then I can do my multiplication and division from left to right. Then I can do my addition and subtraction from left to right, and then all my math should be done in the math problem. So starting with the parentheses, I'm going to stack these. So that's lesson 1. So when you have that paper out, you can go back. If you say, I don't remember how to do the addition and subtraction, look at the top of the paper, because we're at step 2 right now in this lesson, but this includes step 1. So I line up my decimals. I fill with any zeros there at the decimal area, but I don't have any to fill in. My decimals are lined up, so I just bring down my decimal. Then I can add. So I have 8 and 4, which is 12, and I carry my 1. 4 and 2 is 6, plus 1 is 7, and then I just have my 1 to add to itself. So what I end up with is 1.72, 1 and 72 hundredths. Then I'm going to multiply, because I just did my parentheses, by my 0.35, or my 35 hundredths. So the answer to the parentheses is there. Now I got to stack those. Once again, I do not line up my decimals. I just stack them, and then I can multiply. Normally when I'm doing this, what I would do is I would flip those. I would put the one with the most digits up on top. That way I'm multiplying by fewer numbers down below. But the book has you putting the one with the most digits on the bottom. I'm fine with that, because in multiplication and addition, I can do them in any order and flip them around. So we'll go ahead and do it the way the book has it set up. So I'll start with the 2, because it's the bottom right number. So one I always start by multiplying with. And I start multiplying by 2 by 5, which is 10. So I put down a 0 and I carry my 1. 2 times 3 is 6, but I got to add that 1. So 6 plus 1 is 7. And then I know that I'm done multiplying with my 2. So I'm going to go to my second number, tells me 2, circle how many places are behind it, bring down 1 0. Now I multiply by my 7. So from my 7, then I multiply in the same areas. 7 times 5 is 35. Put down my 5, and I carry my 3. 7 times 3 is 21, plus 3, which is 24, so I carry my 2. And then 7 times 0 is 0, plus 2 is just my 2. So now I have a third number, right? So I underline my third number, and my third number tells me to bring down, so I circle the 2 spaces behind it. That means I bring down 2 zeros, so I get everything lined up correctly. Then I multiply by 1. Well, instead of going times 5 times 3, which is fine, I look and I know, well, 1 times 35 is 35. So I would just put down 35. But some of you will go step by step. Either way is correct and either way is fine, because you're going to get to the right answer. So 1 times 5 is 5, and 1 times 3 is 3. It's all lined up nice and neat, so now I do my addition. I have zeros. 7 and 5 is 12, so I put down my 2 and I carry my 1. 5 plus 1 is 6 plus 4, that's a 10, so I carry my 1. And 3 plus 2 plus 1, that is 6. Then I look at how many decimal spaces, not decimals, but decimal spaces I have in each number. So I have a decimal with 2 spaces, and I have a decimal with 2 more spaces. So I have 4 decimal spaces that I have to add. And once I know there's 4 up there, notice every single time I put like a slash mark underneath it so I can see how many there are. Then I move from right to left, always from right to left, those 4 times. So I move 1, 2, 3, 4, and I put my decimal where it is. Once again, notice I have a 0 at the end of my number. Unless that was money holding my pennies position, I'd get rid of it. So my actual answer, instead of being 0.6020, is just 0.602, 602 thousandths. All right? So then they do something they want you to stop and think about. Now, I know some of you already know this already. You're going to remember it from being taught previously, and that's great. Some of you just need a review, and that's great also, because that's what I'm here for. So any number multiplied by 1 is just that number. So that doesn't change where my decimal point is. However, when I'm multiplying by groups of 10, now when I say groups of 10, that's a 1 with any number of zeros behind it. That could be 10, it could be 100, it could be 1,000, it could be 10,000, it could be 100,000, it could be 1,000,000, as long as there's a 1 in that tens or in that first column. That's important to understand now because that makes these easier, but it also is important when we start getting into the conversions between in the metric system between like decimeters to kilometers. We have to understand that 1's in that first position and those zeros tell me how to move my decimal. When I'm multiplying, my number is always going to move to the right. So if I remember that multiplying is right, then when we get into the division part, it'll make it easier to remember. So it always moves my decimal to the right, and however many zeros there are, that tells me how many times to move it. If I move my decimal to the right because I'm multiplying, and I look and there's 1 0, I do the same type of slash mark as when I'm counting decimal points. Because we're dealing with decimals, and it tells me that 1 0 tells me to move my decimal 1 time. Notice, moving it 1 time from left to right now, it gives me 6.45. So we apply the same idea. Other than 1 0, I'm going to have 2. I'm still multiplying by 100, a group of 10. So I'm going to move to the right. How many zeros am I moving? Well, I have. I kind of skipped through those, and I apologize. But it's just moving to the right 1 time because of the 1 0. So on the 100, I'm still moving to the right because I'm multiplying. I count my zeros. I have 2 zeros. So those 2 zeros tell me I'm going to move it 2 times. So if I move it 2 times, 1, 2, then I can see it's going to come between the 4 and the 5. So I end up with 64.5. All I did was look and I saw 2 zeros, so I moved that decimal 2 times. Multiplying by 1,000, still a group of 10, because there's a 1 in the front followed by zeros. How many zeros is how many times I move my decimal. So multiplying, moving to the right, always to the right when I multiply. How many times? Well, there are 1, 2, and 3 zeros. So that tells me to move this decimal 3 times. So I move it 1, 2, 3. That puts it at the end of the 3 digits. So I end up with 645. So I have 3 times. So notice the pattern. If I multiply by 1, my decimal doesn't move. If I multiply by 10, that 1 0, it moves 1 time to the right. If I multiply by 100, 2 zeros, my decimal moves 2 times to the right. If I multiply by 3 zeros, then my decimal moves 3 times to the right. Same pattern if I have 4 zeros. So if I was multiplying by 10,000, then I would end up with moving it 4 times, which would give me 6,450. And it would just continue with that pattern over and over and over again. All right, so down below, it says to explain, so for every 0 after the 1, the decimal moves over 1 place. That's always the pattern. So as you're writing that out, pause the video, finish that answer, and then move on and unpause. As we go through these, please make sure you're staying focused and you're following along with me. Once we get through all of chapter 1, you're going to have more and more problems that I ask you to do on your own. Okay, so most of these I lead you through, and then I'll, in chapter 2, that will change just a little bit. I will still lead you through, but I will ask you to do some on your own. Right now, I'm your leader, so you follow along. Make sure you show all of your work. Showing all of your work, listening to me, that's ears and brain, will help you understand it. Showing all your work as I'm doing it will help you learn it. And that way, when you go to do your homework, you have perfect examples to look back at and it will remind you what to do in case you happen to forget. So multiplying, step 1, multiply. Then we worry about our decimals. So I stack my two numbers. Notice that the 3 digits is underneath the 4 digits. That's one less step of math that I have to do if I stack them that way. Still, starting with bottom right, the 6. 6 times 2 is 12. Put down my 2, carry my 1. 6 times 4 is 24, plus 1, 25. So I put down my 5 and carry my 2. 6 times 2 is 12 again. Plus 2 this time is 14, so I put down my 4 and I carry my 1. 6 times 1 is 6, plus 1 is 7. So I end up with a 7, 4, 5, 2. Not my answer, because I have 2 more decimal spaces to go. So I go to my second number. My second number tells me 2, so I circle the 6. Bring down, and what am I bringing down? I look back up, well that's one of them circled, so I have 1 0 to add. Now I multiply by my 8. 8 times 2, that's 16. I put down my 6 and I carry my 1. 8 times 4 is 32. Plus 1 is 33. So I put down my 3, I carry my 3. 8 times 2, well that's 16 again. But plus 3 is 19. So I put down my 9 and I carry my 1. And then 8 times 1 is 8 plus 1, and that's going to be a 9. All right, I got one more, right? So I have my third number, and my third number tells me to bring down 2 zeros. So I bring down, I circled 2 items, so I have 2 zeros to bring down, and then I can multiply by my 2. It just allows me to make sure everything's going to be lined up correctly when I go to add my columns. So now 2 times 2 is 4. 2 times 4 is 8. 2 times 2 is 4 again. And then 2 times 1 is 2. Everything is lined up nice and neat, so I know I have to add in order to get my proper answer. So now I add my columns. I have 2. 6 and 5 is 11, so I put down my 1 and carry a 1. 4 and 4 is 8, plus 1 is 9. Excuse me, another 3, so that's 12. I put down my 2 and carry my 1. 9 and 1 is 10. 8 and 7 is 15, so 10 plus 15 is 25. So I put down my 5 and I carry my 2. That should be a 2. So I may end up with a wrong answer here, and if I do, I apologize. So 9 plus 2 should be is 11, plus 4 is 15. So I do have a wrong answer here, and I do apologize. So that should be a 5 there. Carry my 1, and then 2 plus 1 is going to be a 3. So instead of what my board shows, if you're listening, then it should be 3, 5, 5, 2, 1, 2. When I look at my decimal spaces then, I have 2 in the top and 1 in the bottom. Once again, not decimal points, because that's always going to be 1 or 2, okay? But decimal spaces. There's 3, so I have to move it 3 times. 1, 2, 3. So my final answer, once again, remember this should be a 5. Should be 355, so 355. And 212, so the and is my decimal point, 212 thousandths. Same thing on question 2. Make sure I do the math first. I multiply first, then I figure out my decimal position. So I start with my 4, bottom right. I do my 4 times 5, which is 20. So I write down my 0, carry my 2. 4 times 2 is 8, plus 2 is going to be 10. So I put down my 0 and carry my 1. 4 times 3 is 12, plus 1 is 13. So now I have to go to my second number. It tells me to bring down 1 0. And 1 0 because that's all I've circled. Then I multiply with my 7. So 7 times 5 is 35. So I put down my 5 and carry my 3. 7 times 2 is 14. Plus 3 is going to be 17. So I put down my 7 and carry a 1. And then 7 times 3 is 21. Plus that 1 is 22. Everything's lined up nice and neat. So I'm going to add those together. My first column, 0. 0 and 5 is 5. 7 and 3 is 10. Put down my 0, carry my 1. And then 2 plus 1 and 1 is 4. And then I just bring down my 2. My decimal spaces, there are 2 of them, so I know I move from right to left 2 times. Remember, unless it's money with a 0 holding my penny's position, I don't have zeros at the end of decimal numbers. So I'm going to drop that 0 off the end and just have 240.5 or 240 and 5/10. All right, so here we have order of operations, which means now I don't have any absolute values, I don't have any square roots, and I don't have any exponents because we're not ready for those yet. But I do have parentheses, so I have to do my parentheses first, then I can do the next step. So add parentheses on my order of operations. Ask for several extra presents from my dear Aunt Sally. Tells me to start with my parentheses. It's an addition problem. Look at the top of my paper if I don't remember. Line up my decimals, bring down my decimal, fill in with any zeros that are needed, and add them together. So once I line them up, I have my 7.3 and my 2.1. I don't have any zeros to fill in, but I bring my decimals straight down. This is addition and subtraction. Then I just add. 3 and 1 is 4. 7 and 2 is 9. Once I have that, I'm not done because that just answers that part right there. So I know I have to take my answer and multiply it by 24 hundredths. So I'm going to stack it once again. It doesn't matter which one goes on top. Okay? So in multiplication and addition, I can do them in any order that I want to. I'll get the same answer when I do the math. So this is just set up with 0.24 on top. So I'll do it that way. I could put my 9.4 on top. It wouldn't change my answer at all. It would just change my work steps. So I start with bottom right every time I multiply. So I have 4 times 4, which is 16, and I carry my 1. 4 times 2 is 8 plus 1 gives me my 9. My second number tells me 2, so I circle that 4. Bring down, I have one thing circled, so I have 1 0 to bring down, a 0. 9 times 4 is 36, so I put down my 6 and carry a 3. 9 times 2 is 18, but I got to add that 3 to it, so I have 21. I'm going to add all of those together in my columns. 6 and 0 is 6. 9 and 6 is 15. I put down my 5, I carry my 1. 1 and 1 is 2. 2 and nothing is 2. So I have all my places, but I have to count decimal spaces in my math problem to know where it goes. There are 2 in the top and 1 at the bottom. That makes me having 3 decimal spaces, so I have to move it from right to left 3 times. Put it where it's supposed to be. There's not a 0 at the end, so I'm good to go. I put 2.256, which is 2 and 256 thousandths as a number. Looking at number 4, I now have subtraction of decimals. Once again, at the top of my paper is the adding and subtracting, so I'm going to stack those correctly. Now, with subtraction, I have to, no matter what, put the first number on top. If I try to switch it around, I end up with negative numbers, and that's going to really throw us off. So I put my 9.2 on top. I put my 0.8. I've lined up my decimals. I look for any zeros that need to be filled in, which I don't have. And then I'm going to drop my decimal. Then I'll do my subtraction. But if I have 2 fingers, I can't take 8 away from it, can I? So I got to borrow from my 9. Borrowing from my 9 gives me an 8, and I carry that 1 over in front of the 2. So now I have 12 minus 8, which I can do. So 12 minus 8 gives me 4, and 8 minus nothing is just my 8. So now I have 0.075, so 75 thousandths, times my 8 and 4/10. Keeping them in the order that they're listed on the paper, it wouldn't matter multiplying wise. I'm going to start with my 4 because I have to start in the bottom right when I multiply. So 4 times 5 is 20. Put down my 0 and I carry my 2. 4 times 7 is 28. Plus 2 is 30. So I put down my 0 and I carry a 3. 4 times 0, that's 0. Plus 3 is 3. So I have my 3. My second number tells me to bring down 1 0. Once I've brought down my 0 and held my place value column, then I can use my 8. 8 times 5 is 40. I put down my 0, carry a 4. 8 times 7 is 56, plus 4 is 60. So I put down a 0 and I carry a 6. 8 times 0 is 0, and 0 plus 6 is just 6. I have everything lined up nice and neat. I add my columns. I have a 0, a 0, a 3, and a 6. How many decimal spaces are in my math problem? So I go back and I look. There are 3 at the top and 1 decimal space at the bottom. So that gives me 4 decimal spaces. So I'm going to move it 4 times to put it in front of the numbers. But remember, once it's money and there's a 0 holding the pennies position, then I'm not going to keep any zeros at the end of my decimal numbers. So I end up with 0.63 or 63 hundredths as my final answer. All right, so now on number 5, they kind of switch it around a little bit. In parentheses, we've seen the addition or the subtraction. But on this one, I'm doing this lesson in the parentheses first. Then I'll go to the previous lesson and do the addition. So I'm going to start with the 3/10 multiplied by 2 and 16 hundredths. Now, notice what I did there. I could stack it to where the 2 and 16 hundredths is down below. I just don't feel like, I want to mess with having an inverted number. So I always put my largest digits up on top compared to my smallest one, because I only have to then multiply by one number. So I'm going to multiply by my 3, bottom right, it's the only one down there. 3 times 6 is 18, put down my 8, carry my 1. 3 times 1 is 3, plus 1 is my 4. And then I have 3 times 2, which is 6. I don't have to go on to any others because there's only one digit I'm multiplying by. So I go to my next step, which is counting my decimal spaces. I see there are 2 at the top and 1 at the bottom. So that gives me a total of 3 of them. So I'm going to move my decimal from right to left 3 times and put it out front. I'm not done. Don't forget to do my next step. That only answered what was inside my parentheses. So now I see that I'm going to add it to the 2 and 83 hundredths. Have to go back to that top of that paper and see that I'm stacking decimals first. So I have to make sure that I line up my decimal positions. Notice, now I have something hanging off. So I have to remember to fill in with my zeros and to bring my decimal down. Once I filled in with zeros, then everything lines up nice and neat. Then I add 8 and 0 is 8, 4 and 3 is 7, 8 and 6 is 14, carry my 1 up, and 1 and 2 is 3. So I end up with a final answer of 3 and 478 thousandths. So these are going to be for our extra work. In case you're not quite sure what we're doing, you can come back with me once you finish the video and you can ask questions. We'll rework through these, or I'll even look at what you took notes on to see if maybe you've just messed up a step somewhere and you were getting a different answer than what I got. So these are for extra practice in case you need it. If you don't need it, then here's your assignment. So you have page 47, 2 through 9, and then page 48, 1 through 6. If you have any questions, I'm here to help you. And while some people are doing the video, I will have people now coming back and I'm helping them go over some things that they missed previously. So everyone might finish their videos at different times, but as long as you do as I've asked, you watch the video and you take your notes, then you're still going to get this lesson. You're going to be right on where we're supposed to be. If you have any questions, though, come and ask.